Everyone dies someday, and Bender is afraid that after he dies, he'll be forgotten. Long after he is gone, who will remember the name of Bender Bending Rodriguez? After his ill-fated attempts to earn fame in immortality and in failure, his friends at Planet Express decide to stage a mock funeral to prove to him that at least they will remember him. Alas, he finds no comfort in these modest proceedings. The next day, the crew is tasked with delivering sandstone to the planet Osiris-IV, whose society is modeled after the mighty ancient Egyptians. As they deliver the building materials for their Great Pyramid, they're placed in chains and forcibly enslaved to toil in the construction of said pyramid for the rest of their lives. The monument is to serve as the final resting place of the Pharaoh Amenhotep, and Bender is in awe. With such a marvelous edifice to his glory, surely this man will be remembered for generations to come. With Bender's newfound enthusiasm for the labor, and robotic efficiency, the pyramid is finished in no time. As Amenhotep arrives to inspect it, he is so pleased with their work that he begins a grand pronouncement, only for a loose stone to fall, crushing him. With the last of his strength, he attempts to declare that the slaves are all free to go, but before he can finish the sentence, his life gives out. The pharaoh is dead. At Amenhotep's funeral, the priests declare that the following day they will select the new pharaoh by consulting the Wall of Prophecy. That night, Bender sneaks out to the wall and makes some alterations, and so when the prophecy is read out, the next pharaoh ordained by the gods is Bender, and his first command is for the construction of the grandest, largest, most elaborate funerary monument ever conceived, that he might be remembered for eternity. As construction commences, Bender decides to oversee the operation personally, pushing the slaves beyond the limits of human ability and punishing them harshly when they fail to meet his lofty standards. Eventually, the statue is complete, and it is glorious. Bender, however, is dissatisfied. He demands that the edifice be torn down and built anew. At this point, the priests are all fed up with Pharaoh Bender's nonsense, and so they declare him dead and toss him into the tomb beneath his own statue, along with his favorite servants Fry and Leela. The three of them are entombed underground, surrounded only by the trappings that brought Bender comfort in life. But when they notice the alcoholic beverages are so strong as to be explosive, Leela hatches a plan to escape, but the monument will be destroyed in the explosion. Bender tearfully objects. Without it, he fears, no one will remember him. By way of reply, Fry and Leela go about what business they can within this prison, pretending as if they have forgotten all about Bender's existence. Unable to take this torture, the robot caves and gives them permission to blow the whole place to smithereens. And so they do, fleeing the resulting explosion and making their way to their ship to escape back to Earth. As the trio leaves Osiris-IV, Bender looks wistfully back at the collapsing statue, resigning himself to being forgotten. But Leela reminds him that he will always have the legacy of his brief reign as a brutal dictator, and that will outlive any monument. Bender's name will live in infamy forever. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
This is a fun one.
Yeah, I really like this one. This one was a lot of fun. One thing that I did notice, there was no B plot. This was like all just A plot. I feel like because they just had so many good jokes to tell, they were able to focus just on the main plot.
Yeah, they were clearly able to do a lot with the A plot here. There really wasn't any point for a second one. It really would have just taken away from it, frankly. You know, we got to really immerse ourselves in this
really odd culture. The obvious comparison is Stargate.
Well, I love the joke of the ancient Osirians visiting Egypt and learning everything from the mighty Egyptians instead of the usual take on the trope, which is
which
the opposite.
Is the Egyptians learning from the aliens.
Classic joke.
Well, because so that idea of ancient aliens teaching ancient cultures, all of this stuff. It was first put forth by, I believe, Swiss writer Erich von Däniken in several books in the 60s, which have been widely discredited, and the man himself even admitted to fabricating much of his evidence. And the concept is also just super racist.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, of course. I like it as a sci-fi concept. Like, I like it as a basis in sci-fi, kind of like, not to break Godwin's law, but the way that the Nazis were experimenting with occult technology is certainly an interesting look at it in terms of basis of a sci-fi story, but really has no basis in history.
Yeah, like, because
Yeah.
the key part about this is you only ever see this applied to, like, Egypt or people in Africa or South America or, you know,
parts of the Arab world.
Yeah, like places where the people aren't white. You never see this when you look at, like, say,
The Colosseum.
Old European castles, or it's just, it is a very Caucasian Eurocentric view of the world. This very idea that, like, oh, these ancient cultures, there's no way they were advanced enough to build all this stuff, and, like, that's complete bullshit.
It's honestly fascinating that these cultures were so advanced, and it's a shame that we lost a lot of technology when they fell. But we've come so far now.
Yeah, the Bronze Age collapse was definitely not a good thing for human history, not a good time to be alive. But, like, honestly, there's a lot in this episode that's just, like, for example, there's actually zero evidence that the pyramids were built by slaves. The ancient Egyptians actually kept very detailed records of this stuff, and we have their attendance logs. The pyramids, as far as they, wrote down and recorded, were built by paid laborers, not slaves.
Well, of course, that's going back to the whole white people thing. Well, white people did everything with slaves, so obviously.
Yeah, really the only quote-unquote evidence that the ancient Egyptians kept slaves is just the fact that a lot of societies back then did it, but we don't have any proof for sure. And then, actually, speaking of ancient Egypt, like, with the joke of many of the Osirians being, like, anthropomorphic jackals and herons and such, I feel
they don't actually have animal heads.
Exactly. Most scholars believe the ancient Egyptians didn't actually think of their gods as people with animal heads. They just appear as either humans or animals, and giving them animal heads was just a way of depicting that duality in their art.
Which is kind of less cool.
Yeah, which I like the idea, but I liked the characters though. I would have liked to see more of the animal jokes, like when he throws the ball to distract the jackal guards. That was cute. I would have liked to see more of that.
Yeah, why is that the only time that shows up? Like, why aren't there any cat people, say, when...
Yeah, that seems very obvious. Like, other than dropping a bag of cats into, which is just a really dark joke.
Cats that our culture apparently just... Holy... Yeah, cats weren't really worshipped either. They were important, obviously, but they, aside from cat, goddesses, they weren't worshipped. Like, cats themselves weren't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would have been the same reason why we started living with cats in the West. Just, they're good at hunting and killing rodents, and they make good companions.
Yes, we love our babies.
I like the use of the ibis head, which is obviously Thoth, but then he's reading the mural, so that would make sense, as Thoth was the god of wisdom and knowledge.
Although one thing that makes me question this episode is, like, I get it's just for the sake of the premise and getting the story going, but, like, the people of Osiris 4 just instantly enslaving everyone who shows up to deliver their building materials doesn't seem very conducive to being able to continue to get building materials.
Well, they didn't have to pay for it.
Well, because it's like, who's going to want to send more people out to bring you stuff when the last people they sent out never came back?
That's why they keep going to all the different companies. They're
stripping the wiring from their walls to sell as raw copper, so to speak. Though it's not like modern capitalists don't have the exact same attitude, prioritize maximum short-term gains at the expense of long-term sustainability. The Osirians have just done away with the pretext, I guess. That's all I'm going to say about capital in this episode.
But then, of course, the Pharaoh's plans to release them as slaves afterwards anyway, so it's like, what exactly is their plan? We want the cheap labor, I guess.
Well, except apparently that's not typical, considering that, with him dying without saying that, it clearly wasn't expected. because they didn't do it even without the order.
Well, of course, Bender's completely misinterpreting what he says.
Well, I don't know if he's misinterpreting it or he's on purpose doing
No,
it.
no, I'm pretty sure this is Bender just being Bender, because this would be him. This is the way he thinks about this stuff. He's being selfish. He's interrupting the guy when he's trying to speak and completely misinterpreting what he's saying. Because to these people, they are freeloaders and slaves. And
did you notice that one of the other slaves is the same Australian dude who was in the forced labor camp back in How Hermes Requisitioned His Groove Back?
Oh, poor guy.
I didn't recognize that, but guess he has bad luck.
Yeah, this poor bastard just keeps ending up in these unfortunate situations. I feel so bad for him. He deserves a years-long vacation at this point, frankly.
I love the fact that a lot of their stuff is written in papyrus font.
Yes. Sorry, Aiden, you were saying?
He's gonna end up at another labor camp.
Oh god, I hope not. I really hope not.
End up having to work for the Atlanteans.
I also really like the guy with the What Would Pharaoh Do t-shirt.
That's funny.
Because, the ancient Egyptians did see their pharaohs as gods made flesh.
I come from the realms of something and fairies. Whatever Bender said when he appeared from the reeds.
Yeah.
Now, the whole thing about building the pyramids as tombs, I'm pretty sure that's not the prevailing wisdom anymore. I believe the prevailing wisdom is that the pyramids were just a place of religious significance, and the important figures were entombed there because of the significance. It's kind of like burying the Pope in the Vatican. They didn't build the Vatican to bury him.
Well, considering how massive the pyramids are and how small the burial chambers are, relatively speaking, and how much of them remains unexplored just because there's no way to get in there without harming the structural integrity of the places, that would kind of make sense. Although, when they were burying Pharaoh Amenhotep, did you notice a bit of an animation error? Because he has 4 eyes, apparently. Yeah, when they were showing all of his organs in jars, 2 of the jars have eyeballs in them.
Oh. Well, maybe they weren't his eyes, but they were just eyes that belonged to him,
Oh, God. Oh, God. Although, with the funeral, I really like the Elton John parody.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Bender's funeral, I completely forgot about the whole thing. I suppose you could sort of say that there's sort of a B-plot in the sense that it's just kind of the one thing that leading to the other, with Bender trying to be remembered. I do like the kind of Mad Magazine joke with the Bender licks butt. Which is so basic, but...
So here's the thing, Bender's whole desire to be remembered, and just so first he robs a public pool for fame, but why would this make him famous? It's low risk, sure, but it'll be forgotten in a day. No one's gonna remember that a public pool was robbed except maybe the people who had their stuff stolen, and then they're gonna forget about it as soon as they replace that stuff.
It's Bender. Although he
even
did
if you
steal
were to remember about it, you wouldn't think, oh yeah, I remember the name of the guy who robbed it.
Right? It doesn't make any sense. It's a garbage plan from step one. And then, when he starts getting depressed over it, there's a line that really makes me wonder what the hell. Because he's like, I'm doomed to obscurity like the rest of you, especially Leela. Isn't Leela in the Blurnsball Hall of Fame?
She is now.
Wasn't that just a couple episodes ago?
Wasn't that just last? I think that was last episode, actually.
Yeah, it might have been. I honestly don't remember the order of the episodes at this point.
It was either last episode or the episode before last.
Although, with Bender's fake funeral, as his friends try to cheer him up, that's a fun thing, but I love how the photo of him on display at the fake funeral is just a mugshot.
Of course it is.
I would imagine Bender would be proud of that mugshot.
Yeah, though Bender is really such an ungrateful bastard in that scene. Fry's little speech is actually quite beautiful, and Bender just yells at him, and he just does not appreciate everything that they're trying to do. You know,
which is just very much in tune with Bender's personality. The idea of having a funeral for him to cheer him up and him enjoying it, yeah, that's very much in his thing. But that also just the absurdity of that, which like we're having a funeral for you, and that's not a disturbing thing for him.
I mean, I think it's cute. You know. Do you guys want to hear my favorite funeral joke?
Sure.
So, funeral of a man who was loved by all. His widow is up, and she gives her speech, and then she goes to sit down, and one of the man's friends, just taps her on the shoulder and is like, "Hey, do you mind if I say a word?" She's sure, go ahead. So he goes up to the stand, clears his throat, leans into the microphone, and says, "Plethora." And then he sits back down. The widow turns to him and says, "Thank you. That means a lot."
That's so bad.
Yeah, I've heard that one before, but
I love that joke.
It's a good one. It's got a lot going for it.
So I was actually just doing some math moments ago, and
I was doing that exact same math. I know exactly where you're going.
Bender asking for a statue 1 billion cubits tall.
That's a lot of cubits.
Yeah, that's 325,000 miles.
Well, okay, I got a different result because a cubit isn't really standardized.
Yeah, it could be 18 or 20 inches. I went with 20 inches.
Yeah, so technically a cubit was just the length from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. I just averaged it out and went for 1.5 feet, which, yeah, then 1 billion cubits would be over 284,000 miles or 457 kilometers high, or your greater number.
Or for a sense of comparison, longer than the distance from the Earth to the Moon.
Oh yeah, for comparison, the upper edge of Earth's atmosphere is only like 6,200 miles.
That must be a pretty big planet then. Osiris 5 must be a pretty big planet.
Yeah, probably. It makes sense that they would have to use jetpacks to get up to the top part, which was a nice attention to detail, the fact that they are building out into the atmosphere. But this definitely was not 1 billion cubits.
No, but, I mean, it does make for a good visual gag regardless. The question is, if something was 1 billion cubits tall and made of stone, would it even be structurally sound enough to stand, or wouldn't it collapse under its own weight?
Well, at a certain point, it would stop being pulled down towards Earth and start being pulled out. So it'd actually be under more danger of being ripped apart.
I guess.
That's part of the reason we don't have space elevators, because we haven't been able to find a material with a strong enough tensile strength. It's not so much the structural strength, which is, of course, also important, but this tensile strength is what's more important once they get up there.
I do like what Bender has going on inside that tomb, though. The little casino, the drinks, just all the stuff that he could ever want.
And his justification's like, yeah, he's not going to need this in the afterlife. He needs it now. So, yeah, why not hang out?
He's not gonna die. He's a robot.
Yeah, exactly. He's a robot. What afterlife?
Although, we did explore robot hell before, so that is questionable.
Yeah, that's true. How exactly
point.
Does that work?
Fair enough. I kind of forgot about that when I said
we had robot ghosts in an earlier episode, too. So they just take all mythology and just throw it into a blender and see what sticks.
And they just do whatever's funny, I guess.
They throw it into a blender and then paint it on a wall like that moss graffiti.
One question that I have, why the fuck are Leela and Fry still friends with Bender after this episode, with how he treated them the whole time?
God, I don't know. It's just classic Bender.
It's a work relationship.
I don't know, I just feel like the ending where they're trying to comfort him and being like, yeah, you don't need the statue to be remembered, you've got your legacy as a cruel dictator. And I'm just like, why are they even trying to comfort him? Why do they care?
Because we wouldn't have a series if they
This is still his friend.
Again, that's my question. Why is he still their friend? Why do they still give a shit about him after this?
Because we need the classic trio.
There really is no excusing Bender's behavior in this episode. He is even worse than usual.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the whole South Park thing. Is like, why are they still friends with Cartman? And that actually came to a head in one of the episodes. Like, I've been saying this for years. Why are we still friends with him?
I mean, back when I actually watched South Park, when I actually liked it, I do remember a bit where Cartman admitted that, like, he and Kyle aren't really friends. Like, just acknowledging that they really don't like each other.
And I remember reading or listening to the commentary in one of the episodes. Of course, we're going to be talking about South Park for a bit now anyway, but they said in one of the episodes, the thing where they decide to ignore Cartman, like, just like as the final straws, they decide to ignore him, and then Cartman starts to think he's dead. But the idea is like, well, Cartman is, like, someone brought this up in the writers' room, was like, Cartman has done so much terrible stuff to them. What could he possibly do that would be the last straw? And eventually they decided he ate all the skin off their fried chicken.
I think I remember that episode vaguely. It's been so long since I've watched South Park, I have not given a crap about it in a very long time.
But the funny thing is, they came up with that idea because they were trying to figure out what Cartman would do, and they ordered fried chicken. And they got into a discussion about how the skin is the best part. And so I was like, well, what would you do if you found out someone had eaten all the skin off your chicken? And it's like, oh, wait a second.
That's
I just love it, because, like, as a writer, that's where you come up with these ideas. You have no idea where these ideas are going to come from. So I just love that story.
Like, okay, that's, like, the thing about Cartman, because, like, in the early episodes of South Park, he was not likable, but at least a somewhat realistic bratty child.
Oh, and absolutely. He's a Kyle who was never told no. His mother is an absolute pushover for him.
Yeah, it's just like, as time went on, he became increasingly more and more of a freaking supervillain. Like, for me, the point where I'm just like, okay, there's nothing redeemable about this character, you are not going to succeed at making me sympathize with him in any episode, is the one where he murders a guy's parents and feeds them to him.
Scott Tenorman. Oh, God. I love that episode because it's just so fucking dark. I mean, even to Kyle and Stan are like, okay, I think we should agree never to piss off Cartman.
Honestly, I think that was one of quite a few points in the history of South Park where I should have been like, okay, no, I'm not enjoying this anymore. Why am I watching this? This is just terrible. And yet,
again, dark humor is definitely my thing, and you can hear the difference in our reactions. Like, you're reacting with disgust from the Scott Pitt-Henry, and I'm just laughing my ass off for just remembering it.
Okay, here's the thing. I can appreciate dark humor. I don't like the way South Park does it. And I feel like the only reason I ever really liked South Park was when I was a teenager, and for still a couple of years afterwards, I was kind of in a place where, you know, that whole thing where, like, when you're a tween and a teenager, anything that's edgy and transgressive is automatically funny.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was the only reason I ever really liked South Park. Also, we've spent a quarter of this episode in a podcast about Futurama talking about South Park.
Yeah. There's a lot of crossover. They're both very well regarded and deep cartoons, so.
Deep. I don't think South Park...
No, South Park is way more clever in many cases than people give it credit for. Because, like, people do like to disregard stuff like South Park or even Beavis and Butthead as being just transgressive stuff for teenagers. But there is more to them. There is more satire going on than people realize.
I won't deny the attempt at satire in something like South Park, but I don't think they do it well. Because that's the thing. Quite often, when South Park tries to satirize something or make a point, it just ends up being so off the mark, and, like, okay, how do I put this?
I admit there is a lot of stuff that South Park does that doesn't age well, but that's part of the fact that it has been going on for so long. But obviously they are trying to satirize pop culture, and they're trying to satirize what's currently happening in the world. So you're always going to have a very quick shift in cultural tones and things. So they are really trying to just kind of hold a dark mirror up to the world as it is. So that's not always going to work in any case. But I appreciate the attempt that they always keep trying new things. They always keep trying to think, what should we be satirizing about this situation?
Okay, like, I'm gonna stop you right there because, like, what kind of a dark mirror does it hold up to us to directly claim that trans people are like someone who wants to be a dolphin? Because that was an actual thing they did.
The fact that there are people that believe that, there are terrible people in government that want to try to regulate this stuff by discrediting it and oversimplifying the idea in order to get their point across.
Okay, and what is accomplished by South Park just doing that uncritically?
Again, I'm not defending every choice that South Park makes, but you can interpret this in any number of ways. But again, we are getting off the track.
Should I bring out the Terry Pratchett quote?
I understand what you're saying. That satire needs a clear point, which is, admittedly, that is something that they don't always realize, but they haven't really let it stop them. I feel like they do kind of come from a place of wanting to comment on the world and wanting to make people laugh. It's just, it doesn't always work out as planned.
I feel like the core of South Park, and really the core of its problems, is just an ideology of, the best way I've seen it described is reactionary centrism. Just this idea that the status quo is terrible, but anyone who ever tries to change it is automatically the bad guy and deserves to be mocked mercilessly. Like, that, at the core of it, is the ideology of South Park, and why I just cannot stand the show at this point. Anyway, let's get back to Futurama.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's a total different debate for this situation. Let's get back into... I think we kind of said what we wanted to about the episode, though.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot in my notes, just beyond listing a bunch of really good, subtle gags, just because this was a very funny, very joke-heavy episode.
Most of my knowledge of Egyptian mythology comes from playing Spelunky, so...
I mean... I'm autistic, and if you're an autistic child who did not have an ancient Egypt phase, what were you even doing?
You were going through your Greek mythology phase.
I had one of those too. I also had a medieval Europe phase.
Listen, you have to split your interest if you have a sibling.
What do you mean?
Well, someone's gotta go into Egyptology, someone's gonna go into Greek, someone's gonna be into dragons and unicorns, and someone else is gonna be into the more biological aspects of weird things.
I mean, my brother and I shared plenty of interests when we were kids.
True, but some things you gotta split up. You can't share everything.
I don't have a response to that.
Can't share everything, or otherwise you drive each other crazy.
Yeah, don't share your half-eaten food, for example.
Or if you both want to be interested in the same thing and you only have the one resource for it, it's like, I want to borrow an Egyptology book. No, I'm using it right now.
Just buy a second book.
Oh, look at Miss Rich Lady here with 2 books.
That's Miss Rich Dragon to you. Mix Rich Dragon, sorry. I only get to gender myself when it's funny.
Honestly, like, intentionally misgendering yourself can be extremely funny sometimes.
Yes, because sometimes I'm a good boy.
Anyway, moving on, I suppose. What do we have in our next episode?
Next time we... oh dear lord...
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your 3 voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancocks, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/SpacePod3K. Follow us on Twitter at SpacePod3K. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew return to the realm of What If in the Anthology of Interest 2.